Welcome back to Ride JBI. This is JB. Today we finished the shock revalve on this 2023 KTM 350XCF. In 2023, KTM came out with a new generation, an updated frame, and WP came out with a new generation, an updated WP linkage shock. This is the third generation of the WP linkage shock. It first came out in 2011, and then the generation 2 came out in 2016, or actually 2015 and a half on the factory editions. And then in 2022 and a half on the factory editions, WP came out with their third generation WP linkage shock, as you can see here. For 2023, the WP linkage shock on the 350XCF model features very good stock settings. For many of the off-road riders that purchase this bike, they're going to be quite pleased with the stock performance of this shock absorber, especially if they are in the proper weight range for the shock spring rate that comes on this bike. Now, the people that won't be happy with the suspension settings that come stock on this bike are going to be experienced riders that are faster than most, and also aggressive riders. Aggressive riders that prefer the suspension to have more hold up during aggressive riding. For this rider specifically, they are an expert rider, so they've been riding a long time, very experienced, and going faster than, let's say, the most common rider. And they are also heavier than the stock spring rate that comes on the bike. So at Ride JBI, we revalved the shock to have a little more hold up while still staying plush and comfortable during riding. We also changed out the stock nitrogen tank for our JBI suspension bladder kit. Details on that can be found at ridejbi.com. It goes into depth exactly on how we designed our bladder kit, how it works, why it's better than a lot of the other options available on the market because of how we designed it and some of the features it has. Again, details on that at ridejbi.com. So for this individual, we did a JBI suspension shock revalve, the bladder kit, and they had also already purchased a firmer spring. All right, I'm gonna repeat that because the plane was going overhead. The rider had already purchased a firmer spring for the shock. So with that in mind, we went ahead and we tailored the rebound stack inside of the shock as well to be matched to the firmer spring rate that they're using. That's a very important feature of a revalve, is making sure that the rebound stack on the shock piston is matched to the spring rate that you are using on the shock, especially if you have changed it from the stock spring rate the shock comes with. Because the majority of the time, the stock shock is set up for the stock spring rate, meaning the total spring force that spring has will be related to the total rebound damping force that the shock absorber has. So when you modify the shock spring rate, you want to modify the rebound stack internally to match. And I'll wait as another plane goes overhead. This customer had shipped in just his shock to us, and we are returning the shock all rebuilt, ready to go for him to install. He's going to reinstall the preload adjuster himself and put the spring back on. And we are also returning this shock with our JBI suspension WP AER48 Pro Fork DIY kit, which the customer will go ahead and install on their own. So once he is all done, this rider will have a JBI suspension tuned rear shock and JBI suspension tuned front forks. So the bike will be matching front to back. This is a quite common option and feature that we offer, is the JBI suspension DIY kit for the forks. Details on this can be found at ridejbi.com. For those that don't like the DIY option, you can always send in your forks to Ride JBI, and we will install the same hardware and setup for you. But the DIY kit is a great way for us at Ride JBI to reach out to riders that don't want to send in their suspension and or have the ability to do it on their own or by somebody locally. So now riders can still utilize JBI suspension technology and install it on their own time. Well, to summarize this video, man, in 2023, KTM has made some great updates to their motorcycle line in terms of their chassis and engine updates, and WP also made some great updates on their suspension as well. This is a first year generation bike, so as usual, I'm sure there'll be some additional updates over the years done to these models that'll further fine tune how well these bikes work, and that's gonna be a lot of fun to watch in terms of what the manufacturer does from here moving forward. For now, however, Ride JBI has done a lot of testing, tuning, and development time. Much of it we have posted to our Ride JBI YouTube channel, so that way you guys can follow along and see how Ride JBI goes and tests, tunes, and develops suspension settings for all the different brand bikes, suspension types, and riding types that are out there. It helps us be very transparent so you can have a better understanding of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what you should expect if you get a JBI suspension setup for yourself. All JBI suspension services and parts can be found at ridejbi.com.